So I went out last night to try to take some star trail pictures. When I do this, I leave my house when it's still daylight so I can scout locations during the daylight hours and find a nice location. I left my house about 6:30 p.m. Drove out to southeast Colorado hoping to find a location. What I tend to look for is abandoned buildings or churches or just cool structures. I drove for about 2 hours and I couldn't find anything. I went through a lot of back roads, dirt roads, and I just couldn't find anything of interest. So I started heading home about 9 p.m. and stumbled upon a side country road, a little dirt road, where I knew that it wouldn't get much traffic or anybody would disturb me. And I just found this cool dead tree in a farmer pasture. And instead of heading home and wasting the night, I decided to just set up, take some star trail pictures. Let me show you. I'll show you how to edit them quickly in using just Photoshop and Lightroom. The first thing you need to do is import all of your photos. I have my SD card plugged in to my USB drive and I'm in Lightroom right now. So I usually will come in here and I'll hit uncheck all. I'll be on the new photos and I'll actually go to uncheck all and just scrub back down to the beginning of the star trails, and I'm just holding my shift key and the up key to highlight them and then just click here. That's going to check all the boxes. So what I'll do is put them in a new folder. So I'll just put this inside subfolder inside my working menu. And I have a whole Lightroom course I can link down in the description if you want to learn how to do all this stuff. But we'll just rename it here. We'll just do, I don't know, dead tree star trails. I don't know. Not important. And then name the folder the same. So again, I just put in my working folder. We'll hit import. And I'll just take a quick second to import all of these. I have a pretty fast computer, so it shouldn't take too long to import. There's only going to be about an hour's worth of pictures, so we should see probably a little over 100 photos. Let's see, I have 28 right now. It's still importing up here. While they're importing, I'll go over the settings. What I did is I used my Canon 5D Mark IV camera body, and I used a 16 to 35 millimeter lens. And I shot at ISO 800, 16 millimeter, f2.8, 30-second exposures. I set my white balance to 4,000 Kelvin, just so it's consistent for each picture. You can obviously put on auto white balance if you want. And then I did some light painting in the first few frames. You can see here I kind of light painted. Now you're asking yourself, why is there a barbed wire fence? Why did I not put my camera on the other side of the fence? I was lazy. I kind of like this post here being in the image. But mostly this fence is pretty tall. It was probably about 5 feet high. So lifting my entire camera body over the barbed wire, getting it set, and then trying to frame the shot and get all that taken care of was a little more than I wanted to do, and it was getting a little chilly. So I decided to keep the barbed wire fence in the shot, and it's easy enough to remove in Photoshop. So you can see 120 photos, 30 seconds of photo. It's about 60 minutes of star trails. At the end, I was bored, so I took a couple quick pictures in my car. We'll actually just move these to another folder. So to do that, you just highlight them, right? Shift key and highlight them, and then you can be in this view here, this grid view, and just drag it. So I'll just put it in a different folder. Okay, so those will get moved. Lightroom's kind of funny. Sometimes you have to move it twice. I don't know. Now it'll say it's already moved. So what I'll do is just re-click on this folder, and you can see they're gone. Okay, so these should be in order now from the time I started to the time I ended. What we'll do is go to develop module. You can just click D, or you can click on develop here. Again, they should all be in the white balance. So what I like to do is really quickly scrub through each photo. Just make sure. A lot of airplanes. There's a ton of airplanes flying. Denver International Airport is pretty far away, but you can see that a lot of planes came through. You can see the North Stars right here. All the stars are starting to wrap around it. One car actually drove by, and that's what that light was. A car drove by. Always a little nerve-wracking being out in the middle of nowhere when a car drives by. Yeah, so those look good. So what I'm gonna do is just do the basic editing here in Lightroom. So I'll just hit Control A to highlight all of them. Turn on my auto sync here just so every image gets synced. I turn the sharpening all the way down. The lens correction, get lens correction going. Transform. I'm going to speed through this because it's more about Photoshop and how to edit the star trails. But we'll just show the basics. If I hit auto, that looks good. Actually, it straightens out a lot. But you can see I lose a lot. You know, the 16mm lens, you get this kind of warpy. And I had the tripod probably about 2 feet up. And it's weighed down with a lot of weight. I use a bag full of rocks to weigh it down. But it still kind of gets this warpy look to it. I think I actually am going to just stick with that, and then we'll just crop it in later. I like the look of that a lot more than this warpy look. Yeah, so we'll do that. Let's go up to basics. I like to use a landscape. So you can see this is all glow out here. Is Denver International Airport. The focal was set to manual, and I had it set to infinity just because I care more about the stars being sharp. This isn't that great of an image to start with, so I didn't care about focus stacking to get post in the foreground to in focus. You could use hyperfocal length. I didn't. Yeah, so let's just speed through here. Again, I put in the 4500, but you can always choose auto here. It gets it a little warm. I like the little cooler effect, so I'm actually going to just dial it back a little bit. I'm digging that. I usually just hit auto to get me a good starting point. And it didn't do anything. Okay, we'll just do this. So the highlights, I like to drop them down just because you get that glow back here. For the whites, if you hold the Alt button down, kind of jump your whites up to the right until you see a little bit there, and that looks good. Blacks, same thing, Alt, hold it down, but blacks you dial back to the left. So now we have the black is black, so white is white. The shadow we could probably bring up a little bit here. What I'm doing is, this is my first image, so when I take star trail images, I always have the first image is where I do all the light painting. And I do that for a couple of reasons. I do that just in case the battery dies. I've had that happen when my camera gets too cold and the battery dies, and I don't get to finish the star trail images with the light painted. And also, this is going to be my foreground. This is going to be my base image, and the rest of the images after this are just going to be the stars. So I like to have that as my first image when I'm editing, and edit that image, and the rest get edited to this. For light painting, I had just a little LED light. You don't want to have a spotlight. You want to have more of a flood. And then what I do is I put my hand in front of the LED light so it's not even very bright, and I walk back and forth. As you can see, I walk back and forth, paint the top of the tree. Very subtle. You don't want a whole lot of light painting. So the top here, what I'm going to do is just get a sharpness filter for the stars here. If you hold Shift key, it keeps the bars straight. So I bring it down to the horizon here, and then change this to sharpness. And then I like to just bump up the texture a little bit. Just kind of gets those stars a little bit nicer. So let's bump the texture up a little bit. And what I've found, if you shoot the ISO 600 to 800, yeah, the image is a little darker, but you get more color in the stars, where if you shoot about 1600 to 3200, the stars are pretty much pure white. So you can see I have some reds, some blues, just more color. So that looks good. And let's get back to this. All right, that looks good. What we'll do is now get these into Photoshop. As you can see, it's still trying to import, or auto sync. So I'm going to just speed through these real quick again and make sure that Lightroom did its job auto syncing all of them to look the same. And you can verify here by just having the basic module open. That's looking pretty good, right? All of them are cropped, and you can see through your timeline down here too that they all have the right crop. See, these last couple haven't synced yet. So just waiting on them. Oh, there we go. So they're all synced. Okay, now here comes the fun part. To get these into Lightroom, importing 116 photos would probably kill your computer. It would make it sound like your computer is about to take off like a rocket ship. I have found that doing 10 at a time is efficient. You get through pretty quick. 10 photos at a time at 116 photos, you can get through them pretty quick. And it's less chances for, say, Lightroom or Photoshop crash for whatever reason, then you have less chance of losing your work. So if you just hold the Shift key and arrow over and grab 10, what you'll do is right click on them, edit in, open as layers in Photoshop. Again, we have our first base layer there, so that's going to be our layer that we're going to use the most for. That's going to be our foreground image, and the rest is just going to have the stars rotating around. So it just takes, well, that's a big plane. It takes just a little bit to get all these imported. Okay, now we have all 10 images loaded, and they'll load from here. The top one here is number 1, that was the foreground, and then down through 10. So what you want to do is, actually this is going to be your foreground image, and everything else we just stacked on top of it. So you actually want to take number 1 and move it down to the bottom. And then fast way to uncheck all layers, if you just, number 1 here, just right click on it, click show hide all other layers. So now we only have the 1 layer active, and this is going to be our base layer. One other thing we're going to do first, I did shoot on a tripod. I did have a bag with weight holding the tripod down, but you never know what's going to happen. So I do like to select all the layers here. So you just start with your bottom, hold shift, go to the top, go to layers, align, and then just do, you can do any of these, or you can also go to edit, auto align layers. So we're actually doing the layers here, so we'll go layers, and then we'll align the vertical centers. And it's just going to go through and find everything. Just make sure everything here in the center is aligned. And then the next thing I'm going to do is hit Control Save. So this file, this PSD file will now be my working file, and everything after this is when I will take all the 10 layers, put them together, then I'll show you here. We'll actually merge them down, and then they'll be added as part of this. So now we have all of our layers aligned. Let's actually go here and hit Show All or Hide, and I'm going to show you how to remove the planes, because you saw there's a lot of airplanes that were going through, and those could be kind of distracting through an image when you're doing these star trails. So that's kind of annoying with the plane trail. So what you actually want to do is just zoom in real tight, hit your brush, so B for brush, come over here and change your foreground color to black. Make sure you have 100% opacity in the flow. I use a softness, so this is hardness section here. And if you can't see this, just go to your Windows, brushes, and brush settings. So here's my brushes, here's my brush settings, and those are just in here. So I like a softness just because it makes it a little bit nicer. And what you'll want to do is paint the airplane trails black, and you will see why in a moment. So let's just get the brush size. You could use your right bracket or your left bracket to make it smaller, or the size is also right here. And you just want the brush size to be about the size of the plane trail, and paint on it right there. And if you hold your space bar, it turns into a hand, so you can move around in your image. And if you hold the Shift key down and click on your next point, it makes a nice straight line. You can see this plane guy was a little drunk and didn't go in a straight line, so we gotta do it in little sections at a time. Again, just holding the space bar to get a hand, and making it move around. You can also use your bars over here if you want to do that. And you can see the plane actually was bigger towards the front of this image. And I'm just holding the Shift key down, clicking to the next point. And this doesn't have to be perfect. You're just removing as much as you want. And you don't want to remove too much, because you remove some of the stars. So the red is the most important part, just because that's the most annoying. So I'm hitting Z for zoom, and I'll zoom back out. And then you just go to the next image, and then you go to the next one, and the next one, and so on and so on. So let me just quickly. These kind of plane trails I'm not too worried about, but I will remove them. You just need a smaller brush. And this one's pretty straight, so you can actually shift click through the whole thing. And it's important when you go to the next one to zoom out. Oh, that was a lot here. All right, let's start with this guy. So shift, click to the next part, next part, next part, next part. And using my space key to move around, get rid of that guy. There was another one. This guy's not that bad. I'm not going to get rid of him. Oh, this guy right here, though, is really bad. And again, I'm not being 100% precise, because you don't want to remove too much. I'm just removing enough to make it less distracting. All right, that looks good. And then one more. Okay. Oh, so this is just a continuation of those planes. So apparently air travel is back. Okay, so this one here, this is going to go through the tree. Not a problem at all. It doesn't matter. Okay. And that looks good. So here comes the magic. Now, oh, we got one more layer. So we're going to have to remove. Okay. To get the star trails now, what we're going to use is a blend mode. The blend mode we're going to use is lighten. And what lighten does is it takes the layer you're on and it looks at the layer below it. And everything that is lighter than the layer you have selected on the layer below it will show through. So when the Earth is rotating, you're rotating and you can't tell, but while we're rotating, the stars appear different places in the sky throughout the evening. It's tough to tell to the naked eye, but they are changing locations in the sky. So the layer below the layer I have selected here, the stars are in a different location. And you can kind of tell if I unclick here, you can see them move a little bit. So every star that's on the layer below will shine through. Everything that's lighter on the layer below will shine through. So let's go ahead and show you how that works. So if you just hold Shift, select all your layers. Now this doesn't work in every version of Photoshop, so you do need to have a slightly newer version. I would say probably within the last 2 years of 2020, 2021. If you can't select all layers and change the blend mode, you do have to change it one at a time. Or set up an action. I'm not going to show you how to do actions, but if you have an action, you can do that too. So what we do is click change normal, go to lighten. And that is the reason why we painted those plane trails black, because those plane trails now are no longer lighter than the layer above it, and they will not show. So all those plane trails are gone. You can see it kind of makes a little mess right here because that plane was so big and took up so much room in the sky that we removed a lot. As we do more and more layers, this becomes less prevalent. The tree moved, it looks like, so it's a little blurry. I will show you a trick to getting rid of that after we get all of our layers. So now that we have all the layers done, what we do is go to Layer, Merge Visible. And it makes the document that much smaller. So you don't have 10 layers, you only have one layer. And then we just go back to Lightroom. Remember we did the first 10. So we want to actually start with number 11. And we'll just go over till we have 10 selected photos. We have 10. Oh, it didn't select 11. Okay. So now we have 10 selected, right click, edit, open as layers in Photoshop. And it looks like we have another big plane. And as you can see, even with a pretty fast computer, I have a pretty fast laptop here, even doing 10 images takes a lot of work to get them in. So imagine if you try to do all 100 at one time. Not to mention your layers panel would get pretty sloppy having that many layers. So 10 for me seems to work. Now if you also notice, it opened in a new PSD Photoshop document, and that's exactly what I wanted. So I'm not messing with this one. I just have this new one here. And then we'll just do the same thing we did before. We'll go to the bottom one here, right click, show hide all of our layers, and we'll just start here at the bottom. Turn on each layer individually, looking for those plane trails. You don't have to remove the plane trails, but in my opinion, that's the difference between an okay star trail and a great star trail, is just getting rid of distracting lights like planes. And I would suggest messing around with it. And if you want, you could try doing this without removing any of the plane trails, see what your image looks like. You'll have a lot of these extra weird lights just kind of going through your star trail image though. Ideally, you want to find a place that is not in a flight path. Okay, so that one's, and then we got a big one here. So, man, that guy took up the whole sky. And you can see how bright white this light is. If we did actually, let me just show you real quick. So let's do shift down to the bottom here, selecting all the layers, and change the blend mode to lighten. And you'll see this guy right here. It's just going to take up that whole image. And to me, that looks horrible. I wouldn't want that at all. So I'm going to go back in my history and go back a layer. You definitely want to remove star trails. Plane trails. Even if it affects a couple of the paths of the stars, you can still make those okay and less distracting than this giant plane. And I'm just using shift key again, shift click, shift click, shift click, and you can go back and forth. It just makes a straight image, a straight line on with your brush, and makes it a lot easier than actually trying to paint straight. I think I'm gonna remove this guy too. So using my left bracket, I'm making my brush stroke a lot smaller, down to there. And that looks good. So let's do a little shift down here, select all of our layers, go to layers, merge visible. Oh, forgot a step. Okay, first we gotta change our blend mode. Change the blend mode to lighten. Shift click down the bottom, change the blend mode to lighten. Then we do a layer merge visible. Then what you want to do is, if you press this move key here, or you press V on your keyboard. Oh, I forgot a plane. Let's do this. If you do this, it happens. Just on this here, and I'll show you what we're going to do next. So I'll remove them. So back to the move key or V on your keyboard. If you hold your shift key, click and drag and drop it here, it's going to drop it right in the center. So now we have 2 on our Star Trails 1 PSD Photoshop document file. So we have 2. We have the first 10 we did and the last 10 we just did. So change this top mode here to lighten, and it's going to take all of the lighter pixels from here and show on here. You don't have to do both of them, because this one here, there's no layers below it. This is your bottom layer, no layers below it. So you only need to do the top layer. And then one step we forgot to do on these 10 here were to auto align, but it looks like it's okay, because the tree, you can tell it didn't really move much in that image. So we're good there. So yeah, change blend mode to lighten, and then do the same thing here. Layer, merge, visible, and then hit Control S to save. On this guy, just X out of it. Do you want to save? No. And then you do the same thing all over again for the rest of your images. So we'll start at image 21 and go to image 30. And I will pause the recording now and speed through this part, so you don't need to watch me do these in giant groups. Okay, now welcome back. I didn't keep track of how long it took me. I took a couple breaks, made a sandwich, and did some errands, chores. So I will show you what I did, but before I get to the final image, I wanted to show you another alternative for those who may not have Photoshop. What you can do is go to this website, startrails.de, and download a free software. It's free. And then this is what it looks like. I won't go into completely how you use it, but you basically open your images, find them. So you need to export them from Lightroom as JPEG files, put them into process, then import them into here, and then you just go to this build Star Trails. It's kind of nice because it has this lighten mode with it helps fill the gaps and stuff like that. I just did the last 6 images, and these are real good images to show the reason why I don't like using this software. It looks pretty cool when it's building it together. It looks cool, but the last 6 images I went through had a lot of airplanes, a lot. And you can see every one of those airplanes just in this image here. So this software is nice if you don't have Photoshop, but you will get all those plane trails in there. So that is one giant reason I do not use it. So I finished there's 116 images. If you have 30-second images, so 116 and a half, and that'll tell you how long it was. Like I said, the last few images had a lot of airplanes in them. You can see in the background here the sky. The discipline is to not get lazy. You spent all the time taking the pictures. I spent an hour plus standing out here in the cold taking these pictures. I don't want to get lazy, in the last few images to not take care of them. And one mistake I was making a lot of when you get going and trying to remove the airplanes, when I was painting in each layer black, paint these plane trails black, just make sure you have the proper layer selected. So when you're clicking through the layers to find the one that has a plane trail, make sure you have the right one selected so you're painting the right layer. I definitely made that mistake a couple times. So yeah, this is what it looks like after it's all done. These are just all of the stars, so just under an hour worth of rotation. And you can see, since I shot on a low ISO, the stars have a lot more color in them, whereas if you shoot a higher ISO, you get obviously the noise, the grain from the higher ISO, but you also get less color. It just blows out the color of the stars. So this turned out pretty good. I didn't do a very good job getting the North Star lined up with the top of the tree. So the next step is, the foreground here looks pretty bad. I wouldn't use this foreground. So to fix that, what we'll do is go back to our foreground picture. This is our cleaner picture. I didn't like this one that much. If you pay attention, you can kind of see the shadows of my tripod right here. It's funny. Probably for my car, and then I'm standing behind my camera. So be careful when you're light painting, when you stand behind the camera and you light paint. Ideally, you'd want to kind of stand over here on the side, on this field, and light paint from the side of the image, and then over here. But barbed wire fence, and I didn't want to trespass on private property, so I light painted from behind the camera, and sometimes you get these shadows if you aren't paying attention. I still have them here, but it's not as bad. This is the foreground image I'm going to use. So to do that, I just do a simple right click here, edit in Photoshop, and it's going to open in its own Photoshop document. Oh, that was the last 6 that I did. Okay, so it's going to open its own Photoshop document, so we'll do the same thing. Press V, To activate our move tool, hold shift key down, and when you hold the shift key down and drag it over to your other image, it drops it in the center of the image so it's aligned. In theory, you would think that you just change the blend mode to lighten and you'd be done, but you'd be wrong, because again, it's going to bring back all the lighter colors, including the foreground, with this. So what I like to do is create a layer mask. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time because that's whole can of worms of how to do layer masks and stuff, but one thing you can do here, image is pretty clean with mostly sky, so you can try doing your magic wand tool by pressing W and dragging it down. Ideally what we're trying to do is just get the sky on its own layer, right? So by selecting the sky here, I could probably click mask. It did a bad job. So let me go back here. It probably isn't going to work on this image, but that's one option. Sometimes you can just drag your magic wand tool here and select the sky. You can do, if you hit Control D, that deselects. You can do select color range and start here with fuzziness all the way down, and then activate the plus dropper here and kind of do this. You can see the sky starts to fill in. That works sometimes too. And it's starting to get some of the foreground here. We can try bringing the fuzziness up, but that brings in too much foreground. So what you can also do is create a layer mask here by just clicking the mask button and painting in. This is a challenge, but it's definitely doable. So if you have a white or a black paintbrush, you can paint in this sky like this. If you don't know how to use layer masks, definitely look that up. This is not a quick explanation of layer masks, but the basics of it is I'm masking out everything here to bring back the layer underneath. So that's one way to do it. So let's delete the layer mask. Another way you can do it is back to your wand tool, press W. So you kind of paint in this here and then paint in the foreground. It actually did a pretty good job right here. As you can see, we can touch up the post a lot faster. Yeah, that did a pretty good job. I'm going to actually hold the Alt key down, or I have a Windows machine, and that's going to subtract that, but it subtracts too much. That's pretty good, actually, and let's see if it'll do the tree. It's not going to do the tree too well, so let's do this. That looks pretty good. And then we're going to come up on this post here and use a hard brush instead of a soft brush. And we actually have to have black in the background. I'm hitting Control Z to undo my mistakes there. So just going to bring this post back a little bit more so it doesn't have that white. That didn't do too bad of a job on the foreground. We got all of our stars now, and as you can see this foreground, see how bright it is. And then the tree looks a lot nicer. The tree trunk looks a lot nicer. The next step you would do here is very painstaking, but you would paint back in the tree using a white brush because you want white to be your top layer. So that's painting it back in. I'm doing a very rough job just to kind of show you what you would do here, and not gonna spend a lot of time on the video showing. I'll do it after the video, but yeah, so that's what you would do. So now we have more of the tree trunk back in. Now the branches do get pretty tricky, so a soft brush would probably be ideal in here. Again, I'm just doing this very quick, just so you can kind of see it. That's kind of how you would do it. This tree back here, I don't really care for. I don't really care about, so you don't have to worry about it. The main thing here is this tree. And the barbed wire, so you could either leave the barbed wire on. I think I'm going to go ahead and remove it. So what I do is I just create a new layer by clicking the plus sign here. Creates a new layer. I call it clone. Call whatever you want. I use J for spot healing brush. J will work pretty good on something like this. So you just click Shift J, and then similar to the way you were paint brushing, you just click on one spot, hold Shift, and go to the next spot. And it does a fantastic job of removing the barbed wire fence because it has a lot to go over to use. And you can see just like that, fence is gone. It makes a little weird line there. You can clean that up again. Go back through with your J. But that's the simples of it. And after you get all of your foreground kind of painted back in, I'm going to leave the post because for some reason I like it. It kind of frames up the tree a little bit. The next thing I would probably do is on this top layer here to get some of these star colors pop a little bit more. Now, just explain how this works with the star trails. When you have a wide angle lens, it gets that kind of fisheye warp look. And depending on how you have your camera pointed, so if you have it low and pointed up at an angle, you kind of get this type of shape in the star trails. Whereas if you have the camera level pointing straight, your star trails would look a little bit different. They would be less fisheye looking, if that makes sense. So the hue saturation here, you can do a hue saturation layer by clicking this guy, go hue saturation. And I like to use this little clicker guy here. And when you activate it, you get this little eyedropper. And if you just click on the color you want, you can just roll it the way you want to edit it. So I like to give it just an extra little pop. So there's the blues, not much. And then if you have some like these oranges in here, you can kind of give that a little pop. Or if you have any reds, sometimes you get some reds in these stars. You can do that too. So just a little extra pop. So on, off. It's not a huge change, but it is nice. Be careful, it does also make the foreground colors, so you might have to mask that out too. That's the basics of star trail photography editing when you have multiple images of stars and you want to put them together in a star trail format. One other thing I'll end up doing that I like to do is when I have all these images is now that I've taken them all and I put them into Photoshop, I will do a shift end like this to highlight all of them, or Control A. I'm going to just crop so that I remove this white area here. Nope, it keeps trying to do the original. No, let's do this 8x10. Okay. So I'm just trying to get rid of those white square parts there. And that looks fine. And then what I will end up doing is exporting them as JPEGs. And then I like to make a quick time-lapse video just for fun, just to show the the movement of the stars, so basically put them all together and make a quick time lapse that I'll export as a movie. Something like this, 116 photos, is probably only going to be about 2 or 3 seconds long. 30 frames per second, 30, 60, 90, 120, 4 seconds probably, about 4 seconds. Again, I'll put a link to a training course. I have a full beginning to end training course for Lightroom. I'll put that in the show more section down below if you're interested in learning how I navigate through Lightroom and all the editing in Lightroom. And I'll post my Instagram information at the bottom too if you want to give me a follow. And if you have any questions, feel free to shout out.